Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren joined by Michael Stamps as always. Mizzou basketball moving down to spot 21 from 15 after going winless in this past week, but a deceiving winless, I guess you could say, or about as good as a winless week you could have, I would say, going on the road at Tennessee, losing 85-81, had control of that game for most of the first half and then slipped up near the beginning of the second. Great shooting by Tennessee, and then Texas A&M comes to town, number 10 Texas A&M, and really does a pretty great job both sides of the ball. Texas A&M does, but Missouri makes a comeback effort as well there, unable to close the deal. So exciting week for Mizzou basketball, and overall, my main takeaway, as I wrote in my takeaways piece from that Texas A&M game, was that going into the stretch here, we needed to see, can Missouri compete with the best of the best? And the answer that we got from that was yes, more than no, even though if they didn't win those two games, and just going to have to learn what they can do better. I think there is obviously the surface level reason they lost those games is stuff you can pick apart in like the final few minutes. Heo Barrett missing that three, and then against Texas A&M, the veiled offensive possession where they can't get a good look, and then allowing Wade Taylor to make that shot. But more so, it's everything that happens leading up to that. That is the real separator. So definitely some things to improve upon there. Michael, what have you thought of these past two games from Missouri? What have you learned?
I mean, it just seems like really circumstantial stuff, right? You kind of alluded to this, but how can you be disappointed walking away from, I mean, to an extent, right? And I think I talked about this a little bit last week about moral victories, and I'm sure they're not patting themselves on the back for almost beating these teams because they're playing at a level where I would imagine they believe that they could start beating these teams. But against Texas A&M, I mean, Wade Taylor hit a tough shot. You know, it was kind of a scramble play, right? He hit a tough shot and he made it. And the play before that, Missouri went into isolation and tried to get a shot that way, and it didn't work. So, I mean, it's just stuff like that. It depends on the circumstance. Obviously, A&M leads for most of that game. Missouri gets out to a really slow start, which I feel like you haven't seen much at all from them this season. So that's something you could probably look back and put a stamp on that. But they came back and took the lead, and that kind of it was probably like what, the 6-2 or like 5-2 minute range, and made it a basketball game and got the crowd back into it. An impressive comeback and an impressive late game stretch. And it doesn't all come down to that Wade Taylor shot, right? But easy to look there, and one guy made a shot and one guy didn't, and it's just circumstantial stuff. Like I said, I said this earlier, but I don't think they're patting themselves on the back for almost winning those games. But from our perspective, there's definitely some positives you can take away from those. And against Tennessee as well. I mean, that is one of the hardest places to play this season against one of the just toughest, grittiest basketball teams, and they held their ground, led for a good chunk of that game, and even when they go down by 14, they come back. It's all really impressive stuff, and there's so much growth. We talked about Dennis Gates for Coach of the Year last week, and there's a lot of stuff there too, that some of these coaching decisions and against A&M specifically that maybe put them behind, but also decisions that maybe kept them in the game as well. So there's a lot to look at. Overarching point, it's really circumstantial, and there's a lot of positives to draw from, probably more than negative. But at the end of the day, two losses is two losses, and it's not going to kill them in the rankings, or they might have dropped down a seed line or two, but not the end of the world.
Right, and we talked a little bit about this when we recapped that Tennessee game in full of, again, there is no moral victories, but ultimately, obviously, they would like to have these two wins for all the standings and whatnot, but I think they're not going to be mad either about the lessons they have to learn from both these games, where they can kind of pick them apart. Specifically, you mentioned that slow start against A&M. It felt a lot of it was offensively, where the Texas A&M defense, again, is one of the best in the conference. And, I mean, ton of pressure on Missouri, few turnovers there. All of their passing just kind of seemed disjointed. Felt like they were trying to run their plays, and it just was nothing was opening up. So again, a moment to learn from, and in that moment, they do like what they like. I mean, as all teams, I'm sure would like to get out to a lead early on, but they do specifically like to run you down the court early on, run that high pace. And so when they get in a situation like that, where obviously they're not in a lead on the scoreboard and then also just not controlling the tempo of the game, really got them out of sorts. And then I think the more positive from it though is in both that Tennessee game and then that A&M game as well, they kind of had to adjust two different situations than they faced before. Against Tennessee, it was when Tennessee started to get in that run in the second half, and Missouri eventually refound their footing, tried to get a comeback there late, and then same thing against A&M really, but they eventually found their footing again on offense. So yeah, again, new situations for this team. We talked about it too in that Tennessee recap, where they haven't had to face some of these situations before, even their game against Florida, which was really close, obviously just decided by 1 point. It was a game that Missouri was in control for a lot of. So these two games, I mean, I feel like we've said this about quite a few Missouri games so far this year, but definitely felt like a tournament game, and one that there's going to be stuff to take away from. And also, I mean, these Texas A&M and Tennessee are going to be pretty high seeded teams. So if Missouri can continue to hold their water and then fix up those things, then again, should be no doubts for the ceiling of this team being what we kind of have been getting over these past few weeks here. So yeah, still so exciting. Missouri basketball season. They'll face Oklahoma on Wednesday here. Alabama coming up on the schedule on February 19th. We'll see how Alabama fares against Auburn. But any thoughts on those two games, Michael, before I have a few last points specifically on this team?
I mean, Alabama's, Alabama. Obviously, they just, I believe they just took the jump up to number one in the country, correct? Number two. Okay. In some of those polls. So that's obviously pretty impressive. And I actually think they might be number one in the coaches poll, but two in uh, AP. But it's all the same stuff. Auburn and Alabama, obviously, like you mentioned. Um, that's going to have a lot of people on their couches watching some good basketball on Saturday. But yeah, Alabama's probably not a team you can walk in and expect to beat. They're pretty good at everything. And if you want to think about a team that's had to overcome kind of internal adversity, that seems like one of those teams that's really done a good job with that. And regardless of what you throw at them, if you go out and you're ahead by 20 in the first half, or you have to force a comeback, they are just really good in any situation. Just great at handling different things that are thrown at them. Oklahoma obviously much more winnable at home too. They have a lot of guys, a lot of good transfers that came in this year. But I would like to think that's a game that Missouri can take, especially at home. This seems like this is kind of a cliche. I throw these out a lot, but this seems like a hungry team that is just, especially with the roster turnover from last season of guys who were on a team that didn't win a single conference game. They just seem hungry. That there's no real quit. I mean, outside of Auburn, which was a pretty, I guess, a blowout if you want to consider that. I think it ended up being like 14 or something points, so not really, but they don't ever give up. Even against, I mentioned this against Tennessee, they were down by 14. You could have easily quit and said, "Yeah, we're not winning this game," but they got that final score down to 4 points to the very very last second. They scored on the last possession right before the game was done. It meant nothing, but there's just so much fight in this team. My point being, I have a hard time believing that they're just gonna keel over and let Oklahoma come into their home court, especially after their first home loss of the season, and let them walk all over them. And Oklahoma's a good team. I know they have a really really good true freshman, Fears, Jeremiah Fears, I believe. Really really good scorer. Probably a contender for the conference freshman of the year, I'd imagine. I don't think really any of that matters, though. I have a hard time seeing Missouri letting Oklahoma come in, especially after their first home loss, and letting Oklahoma win. So good team, and it might be a close game, but I don't see that happening. Alabama, uh, definitely a different story though.
Yeah, certainly. Jeremiah Fear is averaging 15.5 points per game. Um, scored 21 over Vanderbilt when Vanderbilt had their rough awakening back to reality. But yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there. And another thing I was thinking too, of kind of to your point, of just this team being built for a tournament, built for these tough games, is just the depth. And it feels like it's been the team prescribed storyline all season long. Tamar Bates even said it, that when he was asked about the depth on the team this week, he was like, I feel like we talk about this every time when we talk to the media. And there is definitely some of that. And I think a little bit of it is sort of natural when you have a coach like Dennis Gates playing as many players as he does. There's going to be a possible depth storyline, but I think it is real. And these past few games, especially, I think you've seen Jacob Cruz and Marcus Rourke specifically really kind of adjust to the SEC and find their groove there. And also for the coaching staff to kind of find out where they fit in. You also had Marcus Allen playing 13 minutes of the 13 most important minutes of the game against Texas A&M, led the team in rebounds. So overall, I mean, that depth helps them obviously for endurance, stability, and then also just to have multiple different ways. We've talked about all season, multiple ways to win, to be able to diversify your attack. So I think that's it for Mizzou basketball. We're now joined by Lilly Marshall, who is our Mizzou gymnastics beat reporter. Lilly, how are you doing, and how has this gymnastics season been for you so far?
I'm doing good. It's been really fun covering gymnastics. The team is looking really good. Top 10 ranked team, number 9. That's the third week in a row that they've cracked the top 10. So I feel like so far the season's going well, and hopefully it just continues to improve.
Right. Yeah. I was just talking to Michael in our episode last week where this is just a flourishing time for Mizzou athletics. As we have a basketball team who was in the top 15 as of last week. Softball having a good start to their season, ranked at 15, and Mizzou gymnastics definitely a part of that as well. And they just got a win over Illinois Sunday. Obviously, I heard there was a big game on Sunday, so I'm assuming that's what everybody was talking about there. And this was in St. Charles, Illinois, I believe, right?
Champagne.
Okay. So not like a bragging rights thing like they've done before. But Missouri came out on top of that one. Just what went well for Missouri in this one?
Yeah. So for two different events, they earned a season high score of 49,475 for both of them. That was the floor and the bars. So obviously, that's really nice to see at this point in the year. Improvement, season highs. Four different Missouri gymnasts also tied for event titles. So that was Amari Celestine and Mara Tatarsale for the bars, and then Amy Wire for the beam and Jocelyn Moore for the floor. So, really, a lot of gymnasts had pretty good moments. Jocelyn Moore's floor tying event was her first 9.95 of the year, and Amy Wire, who tied for the beam, earned a career high score of 9.9. So, I feel like a lot of things went right in that meet. Obviously, they were able to get a pretty significant win over Illinois. So, I would say it was pretty successful.
Now, with the significance of this, just how does it fit into the season for Missouri? Was this I mean, they're ranked higher than Illinois. Illinois is at 29. Just what do you think this win meant for this team at this moment?
I think it was pretty big. The overall score of 197.200 tied their season high. And now at this point last year, Missouri was earning slightly higher scores than the team is now. They had gotten a 197,400 by this point last year. So I definitely think there is room for improvement. But just the fact that they tied a season high score, excuse me, yesterday is very big because, like I said, you want to see improvements or at least not going backwards at this point. So I think that the win was definitely good for the team. I think they can still earn higher scores, but it's definitely a good sign with where they're at right now.
Right. I think that's lost in gymnastics, especially from people coming at from the outside. And I'm not going to act like I have a great knowledge either, but that you can really the team's individual performances from meet to meet is really the best measuring stick to use compared to, win or loss. It's not like any other sport in that regard.
Mhm.
And so on that note, Missouri again ranked number 9. The rankings come out today, correct?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Ranked number 9 last time, and would assume with a win, not going to drop down. They have a meet coming up this Friday. This is the one in St. Charles, Missouri. Hosting Alabama, who's number 14, Illinois again, and then Iowa. And then just looking ahead, we're getting to, they're getting to the close of SEC season. After this meet, the Zutulu meet, they have Georgia, Florida, Auburn, and Arkansas. All 4 of those teams ranked there, and then the SEC championship on March 22nd. So, Lily, overall, just kind of where does Missouri stand along the rest of the SEC right now?
Well, right now, Missouri overall ranked number 9, like you said, and in the SEC, they're the 5th ranked team right now. They're behind Oklahoma, LSU, Florida, and Kentucky, and they've already faced 3 of those teams. They fell to Oklahoma pretty significantly, but Oklahoma is just number 1 ranked team on another level. And then they also fell to LSU. They actually beat Kentucky in the head-to-head. So honestly, I'm liking where they're at. They haven't faced Florida yet, and I think that'll definitely be a challenge. So, but really, those teams ahead of them in the SEC are all very talented, and I don't really think it's any cause of concern for Missouri. They still have a good bit of season left, and I think overall, when it comes down to the SEC championship, Missouri has a good chance to do very well in that meet.
Now, can you explain? I guess just what I know it's your first season coverage of gymnastics, but what's your familiarity with how the tournament works? What's the postseason SEC like?
Yeah, so I know that for the regionals come first, and it's the top, I believe, 36 teams based on the national qualifying score. So that's just the average score of like the total score for the meets. And I believe it's you pick top 6 maybe, and you drop the best one, and then you average the others. I think that's how it works. Not super familiar because this is my first year. Like I haven't covered a postseason yet, but I believe that's how it works. And with regionals, you want to keep making it. I think it's a bunch of quad meets, and you want to be in the top 2 of 4 to keep progressing. And then obviously the last stage is nationals. So yeah.
Gotcha. And then as far as Missouri, you mentioned kind of their specifics against Illinois, but just what has been working so well for them this season? What have they been really good at?
I think their floor squad has been really good. They have the nickname of the Fabulous Floor for a reason. They've been doing really well in that event. Last meet against Illinois, they posted 7 scores of at least 9.850. So their floor routine their floor group has always been very strong. I think that the vault this year has been a bit of a struggle. Last year, their worst event was the beam, but they're starting to improve in that a little, especially with Helen who's just been phenomenal. So I would say that a lot of events they are looking pretty good in for the most part.
You mentioned Helen there, and just can you talk about her to round her off? She's, won FCC Gymnast of the Week for 3 weeks in a row, only the second athlete to do that. And obviously she has a exciting, intriguing story outside of that too. So for the viewers who aren't aware, can you just kind of share her story and then how she's been doing this season as well?
Yeah, so Helen she actually took a year off from the sport last season. She had temporarily retired, and then she was back in town for a teammate's wedding when head coach Shannon Welker saw her. He got her to kind of get on the beam, do her old routine, saw that it was still looking pretty good, and invited her back for her final year of eligibility. And obviously she accepted the offer, which has turned out pretty well for her so far. This is interestingly the first season as a Tiger where she has only competed on the beam. So just that specific focus on that event has probably benefited her because this is the first season she's ever gotten a 10. And so, yeah, she's having a very good year. 2 9.975s, a 10. And honestly, it's looking like she could continue to perform at that level. So that's definitely been really exciting to watch.
Shannon Welker, even recruiting at weddings, you never know
Yeah.
when you're going to have to pull out those skills. So I'll round it out. Thank you for joining us, Lilly, and make sure you check out Lily's coverage of Mizzou gymnastics over at Missouri on SI. On the note of Mizzou football, which we haven't talked about in a minute, but we are getting close to spring football. They'll start that at the end of the month. But not related to that, there is certainly a storyline brewing of Kellen Moore, the Philadelphia Eagles offense coordinator, just conducted a very good offensive game plan against the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, although his colleague Vic Fangio probably deserves some more flowers, but good season for Kellen Moore with Philadelphia. Is expected to get the head coaching job of the New Orleans Saints. It's been reported. It feels, I don't see any world where this does not happen. Even the Eagles owner was asked about this and has it penciled in. And so the obvious connection to Mizzou there is that Kirby Moore, Missouri's offense coordinator, possibly joining Kellen in New Orleans. And there is a lot to consider here. I think I think it's easy to boil it down to a few simple things, but I don't think it is that simple. And ultimately, whatever decision Kirby makes, I think there's going to be a lot more factors in it than people probably realize. And we'll never know those because we are not inside Kirby Moore's mind. But ultimately, again, I think there's multiple things to consider with this. I think the one thing that sticks out to me the most is the fact that probably these two guys have never coached together in their careers, and I'd imagine their entire lives they've dreamed of, well, in their coaching careers at least, they've dreamed of coaching together on the same staff, and especially for it to be his brother's first NFL head coaching opportunity is fantastic. And Kirby Moore, again, I mean, it's an opportunity for him to get into that NFL scene. There is also the fact of there is good reason that Kirby Moore would want to stay with Missouri. I mean, one, NFL coaching staffs, I mean, coaching in general, but it feels like NFL in particular is so volatile. Who knows how long Kellen is going to be in New Orleans, especially for an organization that, sorry if there's any Saints fans here, is not in the most stable place at the moment. Who knows how long that's going to last? So he's, would be leaving behind a really good opportunity that he's done well with at Missouri to go and take that risk. There's also the pay question. He has a reported salary of $1.3 million at Missouri. Is New Orleans, can they get close to matching that? And then also just the personal facts of, he has young children here that he just moved 2 years ago. There's also, I mean, from more coaching wise, just the fact of, I guess, idea of sticking to these guys now. I mean, he's only been here for 2 years, but at this point he's had guys that he's recruited. He's having them actually go to the school now. And obviously the people that were younger when he got here, being able to develop them and see that out. But also, again, to my first point, that could all be trumped by just the fact that it would be a really cool opportunity for him to coach with his brother. So, Michael, how do you read this? What do you think Kirby Moore is thinking right now?
You kind of said it. There's so much to unpack and so many different thought processes. The first, I mean, this is going to sound really blatantly, kind of simple and obvious, but there's glaring differences in being a college football head coach, which you would assume is one day one of his goals, or maybe it's being an NFL head coach. Those are two completely different jobs, especially now with recruiting, transfer portal, NIL, all that fun stuff. And it boils down to which one he'd rather have. And again, it sounds silly, but we've seen, we've heard Kirby's name linked to head coaching jobs. Fresno State, I believe, was maybe one that there was rumors around, and he kind of makes sense for a guy that's due for a head coaching job here soon. And I feel like we've been saying that probably for a couple seasons now, or at least last season and this one. So it really just boils down to what he wants. I mean, if he wants an NFL gig at some point, then he should go coach with his brother. And if he doesn't, and he wants to center his career by being a college coach, he should stay in Columbia. And obviously, the whole coaching with your brother pitch is pretty appealing as well. It might be hard to say no to that. And, who knows what role he would take on in that New Orleans Saints staff with his brother. Probably you would assume not a coordinator position, maybe a positions coach or an analyst of some sort, or a special assistant, or there's so many different roles. And you've also seen guys with those positions come down to the college level, especially recently in the last season or 2 seasons. I feel like I've seen a lot of that. So it's not impossible that he goes to, coach with his brother, gets even more experience, and then comes back down to the college level to be a coordinator or a head coach. But my question is, and it's 2 great routes. It just, is he better suited as a college coach, or as a college head coach, or is he better suited as a NFL head coach? I feel like you kind of have to pick one or the other. I feel like recently when we've seen college coaches, head coaches make the jump to the NFL, it hasn't gone necessarily amazing. I mean, from my Nebraska standpoint, and as a Carolina Panthers fan, obviously Matt Rule made the jump from Baylor to Carolina, and that didn't go necessarily amazing, and obviously other circumstances with that, but didn't go great. And then he's back in Nebraska, and he's finding some shades of success. I mean, Urban Meyer is obviously a great example. I believe he was in Jacksonville for like a couple months before he got the boot. So you kind of have to pick. And I guess, not that this is important, or super important to Missouri, but we're going to see where what his loyalty is. Does he want to become a college head coach, or does he want to find his success in the NFL? Obviously, Kellen has mainly found his in the NFL, I believe. So it really just depends. It's kind of interesting and fascinating in that sense. I don't exactly know what his skill set caters more towards as a head coach. I guess we haven't seen him be a head coach yet, so that's kind of an important thing. You'd think maybe where he is with Missouri, a collegiate head coaching job would be the next step. But coaching with your brother is a pretty hard gig to pass up on. And you said this too. We don't know this obviously, but I'm sure that's something they've wanted to do for quite some time. So it will really be interesting. And it seems like there's just a lot of just like chatter and rumors and sort of that sort of thing. So we won't really know until we know. But obviously the fallout if he leaves is going to be pretty fascinating. Obviously they need someone for the position. Is it an internal hire, or do they entice someone? Do they take someone away from a different school? It would obviously be pretty late in the coaching cycle. And Joey, we were actually texted about this a couple of days ago. Do they stay internal, which there might be a guy or two in the coaching staff that makes sense to go with, or is there enough opportunity and money probably available to go steal someone away at the last second? An example I use, I think Notre Dame just hired Penn State's running back coach, or maybe it was the other way around. I think it was Notre Dame hiring Penn State's, but obviously it's pretty late in the game to be taking away someone's running back coach. And then obviously Penn State has to go hire one, and they're obviously whoever they hire from is gonna have to go hire someone else. So it's not impossible that they would go with an outside hire too. Again, obviously no general idea at all who that could be. It all depends on if he leaves or not. So, and then obviously there's the transfer portal aspect to this as well, which might make our jobs a little harder. But I guess we'll have to see where it goes. It's a really interesting decision he has to make, and it seems like there are 2 good options on the table for him. So it'll be really interesting to see what he ends up doing.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, as far as internal hires, that we have a much greater idea of on the field there than outside guys. I think the main 2 guys there would be Jacob Peeler and Curtis Looper. Peeler at wide receivers, and then Looper at running backs. Looper, I don't think has been in coaching for a while. He's 59. But he does have, he was the co-offense coordinator at TCU for a few years there. Other than that, no straight up offensive coordinator, or I would assume play calling experience ever. Jacob Peeler was the offense coordinator at Texas State in 2022, has a good resume. Outside of that, too, was the Ole Miss wide receivers coach back when DK Metcalf was there. So we'll see. I mean, maybe the speculation that we're doing will be nonsense. Again, like you mentioned, Michael, there's been countless jobs where Kirby's name has been thrown around. There was even when Kellen DeBoer got hired at Alabama last year, again, pretty late in the cycle. Not as late as this, though. When Kellen DeBoer was hired there was speculation that maybe he would be joining Kalen there. However, obviously, there would be no chance for elevation compared to the obvious one of college to NFL. But when Kirby was asked about that, about why he stuck with Missouri and didn't join Kalen or any other jobs, he mentioned what I had said of being able to have that continuity, continue to work on this project you have of this team with this offense, with the guys you have. So we'll see here. I think, again, it's interesting to think about, and I'm sure we'll find out within the next few days. Kellen Moore, again, can't sign a contract with New Orleans until he couldn't until the game ended last night. So he can do that now, and I'd assume it's going to happen either by the end of Monday or in the days to come. And then pretty quickly after that, we'll go to assembling his staff. There's a report from Jordan Schultz that he's already made those calls to see to try to get some people to join him. So maybe Kirby got one of those calls, and Kirby was in New Orleans the other night to watch the Super Bowl. So there's that. It'll be exciting or interesting at least to follow, and especially again we're getting very close to spring football. Looking forward to it, and the combine at the end of the month, which will be there to cover. So excited for all that's coming up for Missouri football and Mizzou basketball. So we appreciate you tuning into this, and we hope you do the same to the rest of our coverage upcoming in these next few weeks here.